Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It is wonderful to have your company. And today I'm joined by Gabrielle Dolan. Now, for those people who have listened to the show for quite a while, you'll know that Gabrielle came onto the show for episode 168. So a little while ago now, but in that episode, she spoke about using stories to build and lead teams. And today we're talking about magnetic stories. And these are the stories that allow businesses to connect with customers and engage with their employees. It's about creating culture and all of those things that go with it. Gabrielle routinely works with large organizations, and she also works with small and medium enterprise as well. And the work that she is talking about in her latest book is directly applicable to the small to medium enterprise market. It's a really good read, and we covered a lot in there. We spoke about the different types of stories. We spoke about the 5 C's, the creation story, all the way through to stories about challenges. We spoke about how to implement storytelling and what to do and how to tell those stories in a way that is authentic and real without getting into virtue signaling and without being a braggart. There's a lot of really wonderful things that she shares here that if you get this right in your practice, your patients will not only understand who you are and what you stand for, but they'll be drawn to you and they'll be able to tell stories about you that help you grow your business as well. So there's a lot of really good reasons to go through this work. I would really recommend the book Magnetic Stories to you. It's published by Wiley. It's in the bookstores as of the 1st of March, so it's hot off the press. And it's an easy read. It's a great read, and I'd really recommend it to you. So you'll see links to that in the show notes as well. But for now, let's get on and talk to Gabrielle. I know that you'll like this, so please do take some notes. You're going to get a lot from it. So I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye now. Gabrielle Dolan, welcome back to the Savvy Dentist podcast. Wonderful to have you. How are you?
I am good, Jess, and it's so good to be back having a chat to you.
Well, it's great to have you back because we last heard from you on episode 168. And that episode was titled, How to Use Stories to Build and Lead Great Teams. So great to have you here. We're going to be talking about really something a little bit different, which is magnetic stories today. And congratulations on the publication of your new book. It must be a great feeling to get book number 6 out the door. Well done, you.
Yeah, thank you. If anyone had told me 10 years ago I would have written 6 books, I wouldn't have even believed I would have written 1, let alone 6. But it's amazing how you keep thinking of things to write.
Yeah, it's a very active mind, so which is really wonderful. This book is a little different to your other ones, as well, and I wanted to talk about why this book was written. And we understand the value of storytelling, but this book in particular, what was the impetus? What was it that you felt you really wanted to say in this book that you haven't been able to express or didn't express in the other books?
Yeah, you're right, Jess. This book is different. I think all my other books around storytelling and leadership were aimed at leaders, leaders that sort of lead big teams or whatever. This is really aimed at anyone who's sort of serious about their brand. So from the individual to just a startup company to, a little practice to a large multinational. So it does have a broader reach. And the reason this came about, because seriously, every time I write a book, I say, that's it. I'm not writing another book every single time. And that sort of is the case for about 12 months, which was the case last time. And what I noticed was around this time last year, I just kept noticing, because storytelling is becoming very popular. So I noticed people referring to brand storytelling, which is, sort of how you communicate your brand through storytelling. And they would be calling something a story that wasn't a story, or they'd be thinking brand storytelling was one story or a corporate video. And I just found myself going, that's not brand storytelling. That's not brand storytelling. I saw so many people trying it, but not getting it right. And then I saw so many people that had amazing stories that they should be sharing with their customers and employees, but weren't doing it and either didn't know how or didn't know the power of doing it. So that's when you sort of go, I should write a book about this.
Well done you. Well done you. That's fantastic. So what I'd like to ask you then is, what is brand storytelling? Let's kind of get to the meat and potatoes of it, because there'll be people listening to this who might really know what it is, but there'll be others who kind of think they might understand it, but may need a bit of clarification. So can we just start at the very beginning?
Yeah. And look, clearly this is my definition of brand storytelling. Sometimes it's good to explain what it's not. And I don't think brand storytelling's a logo or, a tagline or a TV commercial. It's not a slick corporate video. It's not values and strategy on a page. And it's definitely not just one story. So to me, brand storytelling is the deliberate and strategic approach to not only share stories that amplify your brand, but to do things that create stories. So you start with brand, being very, very clear on what your brand is, but then how can you share and create stories to communicate that, to amplify it, and to reach a much broader audience?
So I just want to go back to the basics there. Let's talk a bit about what brand is, because you said it's not a logo, it's not this, it's not that. So can we just, before we get into the brand storytelling, can we just talk for 5 seconds or so, or however long it takes, but let's just touch on what is a brand? Yeah.
So to me, a brand is the stories people tell about you. It's it's your brand. It's almost like if someone said, "Hey, thinking of doing some work with Jess. What's he like?" So what are people saying about you? What are you known for? And the reality is, every individual has a brand. Every company has a brand. Whether you know it or not, you have a brand. You are already known for something. And the sooner you take control of that brand, the sooner you're aware how brands can develop organically without you even knowing, or you can develop it strategically. And when I say strategically too, it's still got to be authentic. It's not pretending to be someone else, but every single person has a brand, every single person. So, and your brand, people will, based on whether your brand is a good brand or a not so good brand, they will work for you. They will buy your stuff. They will invest in you. They will refer you. So it's pretty important to take control of your brand and make sure it's the brand you want to be known for.
And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to explain that, because I think sometimes just even the topic of brand can be a bit confusing for people in small business, because they're thinking Coca-Cola signs or whatever it happens to be, right? And it's a much bigger concept than just the logo or the sign or whatever.
Sometimes when I talk about this, in my training, I'll do something like, who's got a strong brand? And, people just pull out, Oprah Winfrey, Steve Jobs, Donald Trump, even whether it's a good brand, that they got a strong brand. And it's like, everyone's got a brand. It's not just celebrities, and it's not just the big companies. Everyone has.
Yeah. So let's get into the storytelling part of the brand, because if we bring all of that together and it's done effectively and well, you've already alluded to some of the benefits of getting that right, which is people will refer to you, buy your things, see you in a positive light. And of course, you get to be authentic and do the things that matter most to you. So I guess, what are the actual benefits of getting this right beyond the things we've touched on already? If someone does this really well, what might they expect?
Yeah, so I might actually share an example of what I think is a great brand story, and also demonstrate what a great brand story can do for you. So growing up, I was such a tomboy. I played football, I played cricket, I rode my BMX bike and skateboard, and I never was into dolls. So, and I never had a Barbie. I never had a Barbie doll. And as an adult, when Barbie was being, I guess, shamed as being a bad role model for girls, I happily went along with that story. I had 2 girls and I refused to buy them a Barbie. And I think I told everyone else that they're not having a Barbie. And actually last year when I was writing the book, I actually came across the backstory of Barbie. And Barbie was created by Ruth Handler, which was the wife of Elliot Handler, who's the co-founder of Mattel. Yep. And what she noticed was that when her daughter Barbara and her son Ken, and yes, Ken and Barbie were named after her kids, when they were playing with their respective dolls, they would pretend to be adults. And what she noticed, that when Barbara was playing with her doll, the only role she could play was that of caregiver, because that's what the dolls were. But when Ken had his dolls, he was imagining himself as a doctor or a firefighter or an astronaut, or as a superhero. So that was the boys' experience. So Ruth actually set out to work on a 3-dimensional plastic doll with an adult body and with, clothing that you could swap around. She pitched the idea to her husband and the other execs, and they did not like it at all. They just thought no one would buy a doll for their daughter that literally had an adult body, literally had breasts. But she persisted, and in 1959, Barbie debuted at the New York Toy Fair, and, as they say in the classics, the rest is history. But there's a quote that I love from Ruth Handler, and she says, "My whole philosophy of Barbie was that through the doll, the little girl would be anything she wanted to be. Barbie always represented the fact that a woman has choices." Now, when I heard that backstory, it completely changed my view of the Barbie brand. And so not only changed my view, but will absolutely influence my purchasing decisions.
Yes.
So, my kids never got a Barbie, but I reckon my grandkids might. So, and to me, I would be saying every time you get on a website or a packaging on Barbie, that story should be there, because that story, first of all, it would negate the negative stories that are out there.
Yes.
But it would just, even without the negative stories, it would make people connect to the brand and influencing their purchasing decisions, which is sort of what you want to do with any form of brand or marketing or advertising.
Isn't that phenomenal? Because I have 2 daughters as well, and Barbie is a subject of contention in our house for the same reasons I'm sure she was a subject of contention in your house. But hearing that story, really, again, I'm just reflecting on, I hadn't heard that story before. So I'm just going, wow, that's kind of women's empowerment, decades before it became a thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at some of the early Barbies in the 60s and 70s, there was like astronaut Barbie and executive Barbie and surgeon Barbie. And that story, if more people knew that story, I think it would have such a positive impact on the brand. And so, Jess, I heard that story at a conference and I went to find it, and it is sort of on their website somewhere, but I had to find it. And I was researching for a book, and that's the only reason I got down and dug down, where I think that just should come up front and center.
Absolutely. I wonder why the execs at Mattel have not picked up that story and run with it more.
Yeah. And again, I guess that leads to the other question, or the other thing. People don't realize the power of it. They actually, I think a lot of companies don't even realize the power that they have some really cool stories, either about how the company created or how the product came about, that are going to have more impact and really connect and engage with people than like timelines. Like saying in 1959, Barbie was debuted, and in 1967 it had sold 1 million, blah, blah. That's what people think a story is, and it's not a story, it's a timeline.
That's actually really interesting. So let's just dig into that for a second. What actually is a story as well? We spoke of what is a brand.
Yeah.
What is a story?
Yeah.
Because I think that's really important, because I know on many a dental website there's a timeline of Dr. Bloggs was born, Dr. Bloggs graduated, Dr. Bloggs did his first implant, Dr. Bloggs, so I get it, but it is not a story.
No, it's not a story.
So what are the elements of story?
Yeah, so a timeline is not a story. And you often see people change the About Us page on their website to Our Story, but actually don't make a story. So, and you're right, what you said, it was, Dr. Blah Blah started here, and Dr. Blah Blah's got 27 years experience. And I was like, who cares? Like, seriously, no one cares. What about if you heard about Dr. Blah Blah had braces when he was 12 and had a terrible experience with his dentist, and made a decision right then that he wanted to become a dentist to make sure every kid that had braces had a really great experience. Hello.
Much more of a connection.
Yeah. So, yes, sure, I want to know if you're qualified. Good. But I'm sort of going to make an assumption you are.
Well, that's a fairly safe assumption too, especially here in Australia. You might be thinking, well, there's a registration board for a reason. That's a fairly safe assumption. So you're absolutely right. It's about getting behind.
Yeah, so sort of what makes a story is you got to try to have that emotional connection. And when I say emotional, it's not like I have to get all teared up or anything, but it's a human connection. So, like the story about the Barbie, I connect with someone doing something. And so it's about a person, it's about a human. It's not a bunch of facts all stated together in a logical sequence. That's a timeline. And that's why it's called a timeline. It's not called a story, it's called a timeline.
So obviously there's going to be different types of stories. We've spoken a bit about the Barbie creation story, obviously how Barbie came to be. And what other sorts of stories might a brand be looking to have in their repertoire of stories? What sort of stories would exist in that repertoire?
Yeah, so I call that the Barbie story is the creation story. So it's either the creation of how a product came about, like Barbie, or how the company came about. So, especially a lot of startups, even just that hypothetical example I gave you before, maybe the dentist that started their practice, when you go back, it's finding out their passion, why they did what they did. So the creation story is one, and it's sort of like I said, why the company created or why the product was created. That tends to be, sometimes when people go brand storytelling, that tends to be the only one they focus on and only share that story. But I think it'd be worthwhile if companies looked at other types of stories. They all start with C because I like a good palette. It's like one is culture story. So these are stories around your values, so the company values. And again, if it's an individual or if it's a really small practice, what are the values that you hold? So is it integrity? So having stories around that. Perhaps it's the story you got, one of the values of the company is great customer service. So have you got amazing stories of employees delivering great customer service? A really famous one comes from 1975, right? Yeah. At Nordstrom. If you Google this, you'll see it everywhere. But a man bought a pair of tires from a tire shop and he wanted to refund them. And when he went back to refund them, like months later, the tire shop had closed down and a Nordstrom store was in its place. The Nordstrom assistant still refunded the man his money, even though Nordstrom didn't even sell tires.
Wow.
That happened in 1975. If you Google that, if you do a Google search on that, you get over 7 million references to that story. So, imagine, and clearly the shop assistant didn't do it to say, oh God, I'm going to go viral with this.
Going viral in 1975 had a totally different meaning to what it does now, right?
I know. I often say, imagine if someone had said to him, "What you did is going to be all over the internet. You're going to go viral, and you're going to have 7,000 Google searches." He would go, "What's an internet? What's Google? And what is this virus you're talking about?" But that is like decades. That is like 46 years. People are still talking about this story. So imagine, and I've researched that story extensively because I actually wanted to find who initially shared it. Was the customer or was it Nordstrom? And I can't find it, right? But imagine if one of your employees did something amazing and no one heard about it. Like no one heard about it. So it's you don't have to put out a press release every time you do great customer service, but if you've done really good service that demonstrates your values, so demonstrates your brand, you should be sharing it. So that's culture stories I talk about.
Yeah, just on that, Rel, sorry to interrupt you, but with your culture stories, obviously that Nordstrom one has gone viral and has become a bit of a sensation. There's going to be lots of instances where people live the values, exhibit the culture, et cetera, et cetera. Just thinking about where to share these stories. Clearly, that one was an externally shared story so that the general public can now hear about it and so on. With the culture story, is that something that you share all over the place, or are there better forums to share these 5 different stories?
Yeah, really great question, Jess. So I often say share them both internally and externally, but stories like that are super, super powerful when they're shared internally.
Yes.
And as like, say, for example, induction programs. And I know for a fact, because again, I did a lot of research on Nordstrom. I've been following them for decades. During the 80s and 90s, their induction program was purely stories about employees delivering exceptional customer service. Nice. So could you imagine a new employee coming in, hearing the Nordstrom story, hearing like story. You walk out of there going, okay, so my job is to just find ways to deliver exceptional customer service, which was their main value. So I think, and I talk about this in the book, there's a few good examples, really, really good induction programs are just full of those type of culture stories, because without the stories, I mean, you could go, oh, our values are customer service and integrity. Again, who cares? So what? Yeah. It's only through the stories that culture and values come to life.
Love that. That is awesome. Thank you.
So quickly, the other three types of stories are community stories. So perhaps it's stories of the things you're doing in the community, that your employees might be just doing really good things in the community that actually have got nothing to do with what you're selling, but you're just going, hey, our employees are great. Like, make your employees the heroes. Customer stories. So again, you know, that Nordstrom story about the tire, that technically could be a customer story as well. So my advice is, don't get too hung up whether is that a customer story or is it a culture story. It doesn't matter. Just share it. And then the other story is challenge story. So when has, you know, the leader of the company faced a challenge, and what have you done? Where has the company faced a challenge? So, I mean, we saw a huge amount of those during COVID last year, of companies responding to a challenge. One of the ones I talk about, a case study in the book, is the gin distillery Archie Rose in Sydney. So when they went into lockdown in March, the first one, so many lockdowns.
I know.
They've got a bar, so they were going to potentially lose their 15 bar staff. They decided immediately to switch from making gin to making hand sanitizer. And when I say immediately, within 3 days, they had sourced bottles, they'd reconfigured their production lines, they created and printed labels, and had produced 7,500 bottles of hand sanitizer in 3 days. Like, wow. You know, and then I know, it's amazing. It's like their values are like quality and innovation and stuff. So they went on to produce over 100,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. They not only kept their 15 staff, but they were able to employ another 15 staff locally that had lost their job in the hospitality. So that story, I spoke to the Archie Rose, and they said that story got instant local and global attention. Like, they were on Japanese TV and, you know, on the BBC, and they said that they increased their database from 50,000 to 100,000 contacts. And the head of marketing said she thinks her brand awareness for a really small company, because they were only about 5 or 6 years old, for a really small company, she said our brand awareness, I think, elevated like about 18 months ahead. So, you know, that story, it's a great example of a challenge story, but also a culture story, also a community story.
It's a great story.
It doesn't sort of matter what type of story it is, but it's trying to find these different types of stories that show your brand. I mean, this is their brand.
Look, Rel, I'm listening to this and I think that is amazing and outstanding. I can hear someone in the audience somewhere is going to be having the thought, and I just want to flag it because I know that there'll be others going like, if I share that story, am I losing the altruism around it? Do you know what I mean? Like, am I being a knob, basically? Excuse the direct line there. Like, am I taking something that I'm doing that's really good and trying to commercialize it, and therefore am I being less good in the process? I just know that there's going to be someone driving along, listening to this podcast going, that sounds great, but you know, they're kind of trying to use it all as collateral for business purposes rather than just doing the good deed.
Yeah, and look,
how do we reconcile that?
Yeah, and I get that. Like, some people go, well, you should just do it. You shouldn't be doing it to create a story that you could then. Yeah, and I go, so you're not doing it to create a story, but it's also going. But if it's genuine, if it's authentic, if it's going to first of all, the culture ones, for example, if it's going to show your other employees, this is what we expect, this is why we're doing it. If one of your employees has done something and you're really proud that they did that, I mean, to me, why not share it? Why? So you're right. It's not about being a wanker and going, oh, look at what we did, aren't we good? So it's not about that. It's sometimes putting it out there, and you can put it out there. You know, a lot of the times your customers might share it, but you don't want to rely on that. You don't want to rely on your customers sharing it.
No, I really appreciate you addressing that, because I just know that some people get a bit twitchy about virtue signaling and all the rest of it. And I think the point you made is really, really important. So anyone listening to this who's kind of had that thought, it's about the authenticity, and it's about, if you've done it with the best intentions and you're not doing it for marketing purposes, or you're just doing good stuff because it's good stuff, then share it. But even if you are creating stories and you're being intentional about it, as long as it's genuine, it's fine, right?
I think as long as it's genuine, as long as you aren't bragging. So perhaps the way you tell the story can sometimes people tell stories, and even though it's genuine and authentic, the way they're telling it, you go, oh my God, stop, bragging about how great you are. You can bring in some humility, you can bring in vulnerability. I mean, just even saying things like, we were so proud we were able to do that so quickly, that reduces that effect where people go, oh, you're just doing that as marketing or a PR stunt. And please, you see some people that do something knowing it's going to generate stories, and that's the reason they're doing it. People see through that. People see through that straight away.
Yeah, very cool. So, look, we've gone through really what brand is. We've gone through what story is. We've linked brand storytelling and what can happen if you get that right. We've articulated the different types of stories. I guess the next question is going to be, really, how do we implement this into a business? What's the structure? What's the process? Is there a method to it, or is it simply just rambling on? What's I'm suspecting it's ramble on. Yeah, ramble on said no one ever, especially on a podcast. Jesse Green, you should know better than that. By the way, I am the greatest rambler of all times. You're just a word stream. It's just thought clouds. But I know you're going to be much more disciplined than I am in that regard. But what is the structure? What is the process of implementing that?
Great question. And I think there is a process that I certainly think is the way to implement brand storytelling. And I think the first step is it starts off with defining your brand. So what is it you want to be known for? And again, you could do this at an individual level, or whether it's, you could just have a small team of 4 or 5 people, or it could be a large multinational. So, what's your brand? What do you want to be known for? Do you want to be known for exceptional customer service? Do you want to be known for innovation? So it's being clear on what you want to be known for. Now, most companies would describe that as their purpose and their values, which is good. Most companies have them. They have them stated, and they have them, they print them on coffee mugs and put them on walls, and then tick, everyone understands our values, which is not true. They need to communicate through story. So understanding what you want to be known for is the first step. The second step, I think, is to educate people around the power of stories. Now, I know I'm probably a bit biased in this because this is what I do for a living, but it's when you said before, like Mattel, why wouldn't they make that Barbie story readily available? Because they don't understand the power of stories. So some form of education around how powerful stories are, so your employees can find them and share them and create them. And then if you're a larger organization and you've got leaders who are speaking in an induction program or speaking externally, actually teaching them how to tell stories properly, because as you said, you don't want to be a rambler. And so I reckon they're the first 2 steps. And then I think there's 3 other steps that continue, that just keep going in this circular motion. And that is collecting stories. So finding them, do you have a Barbie story? Do you have a Nordstrom tire story? Finding them, communicating them. So, where are you communicating? Is it on your website? Is it in your induction program? Is it on social media? Is it in a newsletter? Communicating them. And then that final bit of creating them. So if you are genuinely living your brand, if you are genuinely living your values, you'll create stories, which then you can start sharing. So it just starts this, circular motion, or constant motion of collect, communicate, create, collect, communicate, create, and just keeps going.
It's a really interesting thought that has come to mind as a result of this is, and I think you probably would do this intuitively or you'd have some method for doing this, but I suspect people probably need to capture their stories and have like the library of stories. So when you work with people and you're saying, you know, these stories, we've got to capture them and do that, how do, just on a practical level, do people kind of create a log of their stories? Do they create a document of stories? I know that's kind of syntax and practical, but because for me, I think like all of us, we've got a million stories throughout our life that we could talk about, share, etc. But sometimes you just forget them.
Yeah.
Especially as I'm getting more and more grey hair, the memory is perhaps not as good as it once was. But the point I'm trying to make is, how do you collect your stories?
It can be a very practical thing, because if they're just in our head, we'll forget them and they'll stay in our head. So to me, I know some people that just keep a journal. Like I sometimes just keep a journal and write down as things happen to me. I could go, that could be a really good story about something. Or if I'm trying to find a message about something. So if I'm trying to find a message around integrity, I will go, okay, well, why is that important to me? And what's been times in my life where that's come through, that's demonstrated? I was actually being interviewed the other day, and someone said, you know, you just seem to have this just do it attitude, or just give it a go. Where does that come from? And you think about it, I know exactly where it comes from. It comes from my parents. And so I can give a specific example of when I applied for a job and I got an interview, and then on the weekend in the paper, you know, way back then when jobs were advertised in the paper, I saw the job advertised again. And I remember saying to Mum, I obviously didn't get the job. And she went, yeah, but no one else obviously got it either. So why don't you apply again? But just apply with a much stronger letter, which I did, and got a second interview. And they asked me why I applied again. And I said, because I really know I can do this job. And so I was offered the job on the spot. So you could just say, oh, because my parents raised me that way, but that's not a story. It's I remember that. I still remember it. And I remember what Mum said to me. So you just sort of start to collect these stories. And once you start thinking about it, you'll find them. And once you realize the power of storytelling, you'll start to notice a lot more. So write it in a book, write it in a spreadsheet. Some people are very surprised with this, but I love spreadsheets. So I love story.
A storyteller who loves spreadsheets. That's a story in itself.
I know. So, and I call it my storytelling spreadsheet. Genius name. But it's literally, if you think of it, if you've listed all the messages you need to communicate, whether it's around your values or your strategy or just whatever, and you list all these potential stories you could use, it's almost then becomes a bit of a matching process to say that story would work for that message.
It's funny you should say that, because I have not written 6 books like you, but I'm currently writing my second book, and I've mapped the whole structure on a spreadsheet. And my editor, I don't know whether she was aghast at the nerdiness of that or impressed by the order and structure behind it. But I love your idea of a story spreadsheet, and because I think that, for me, again, it just gives a filing system of how to do things. And I'm a fairly orderly, linear thinker and things, so I really like you just sharing that. So thank you.
So Jess, could you imagine if you've got all the messages you want to get across in the book? Imagine if you had another column to go, what are your personal stories you could share? And then what are other people's stories that could bring the message to life as well? Seriously, your book is almost written, my friend, almost written.
Yeah, it doesn't feel almost at the moment, Rel.
Because you got to find the stories.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right, and I think that's really interesting. But that came about because when I wrote the first book, I started writing, and I didn't have a structure enough. And so I got horribly lost in the book. And I remember ringing my editor. She wasn't my editor yet. She didn't know that she was going to be my editor. I just kind of randomly threw myself at her feet and said, help. But we had to spend a lot of time untangling what I'd written without that structure. And so that first book, the reason it's taken so long to write the second book actually is because I didn't have that spreadsheet or that structure up front. And you've said, every time you write a book, you say never again. And then 12 months later, you say, oh, okay, I'm ready again. Well, I said never again and really kind of meant never again, because it was horrible. But now I think enough time has passed. So there we go.
Yeah. And just on that too, even when I was writing my book, I I sort of get to about the 15,000 words and you go, oh, well, I think I'm done. It's going to be a very, very small book. And it always happens. But then what I did, I just reached out and I go, okay, I need heaps of examples of companies doing this well. And that's when the book came to life. And so, there's some case study, the book's peppered with little stories like the Barbie story and the Nordstrom story, but some companies are doing really, really cool stuff with storytelling that they warrant a whole chapter. So there's 5, I call them case stories, not case studies, because they're written in a much more interesting way than a case study. But things like one of the oldest restaurants in Florida, that they, 5th generation restaurant, they use stories on their menu, in their wine list. I contacted them asking them when they started to use stories, thinking, maybe it was 10 years ago or so. It was 1946. They made this commitment to find stories, and they hired a journalist that would write a daily newspaper column about the customers of their, the employees, and just 1946 they got serious about storytelling. So they're doing some cool stuff.
Can I tell you a story?
You can. I won't judge.
Yeah, I know. She says, rocking back in a chair with that
taking notes.
No, there's a really interesting story. There's a guy I interviewed on my podcast. His name's David Boucher, really nice man. And he is a furniture maker. And he builds wonderful Art Deco furniture. And, his market is very premium, high-end market. And during recessionary times, there was some challenge in selling those pieces. And he's got a wonderful story. He's the only person outside of Rolls-Royce that's been commissioned to design an interior for Rolls-Royce, etc. Heaps of things. But he had this beautiful cabinet, and the cabinet was made from a tree that was in the Palace of Versailles. And this tree was struck by lightning and died and was then cut down, and he managed to get some timber from that tree. So what sold the piece of furniture he made, which is a cabinet of some description, was the idea of perhaps Napoleon and Marie Antoinette strolling through the Palace of Versailles, having a picnic under the tree, etc. And this cabinet is probably made from the timber that Marie Antoinette or whoever was inhabiting the palace at that time would have sat under, because they had been able to date the tree. They knew when it was around. And so he was able to sell a very expensive piece of furniture based on that story. And I thought that was a really good way of bringing a piece of furniture to life. And it's just really cool to hear.
And Jess, I think you've just demonstrated again one of the other amazing benefits of storytelling. So he's used that story. You've heard that story. You've connected with it so much. You've just retold it.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, the power of story. People will just keep retelling the story because they connect and engage with it and remember it because it's a story.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So we've covered a fair bit of material today, Rel, and you've been really generous with your time. And firstly, thank you. Great to have you back on the show. Officially a repeat offender now.
If I do manage to write another book, I'll come back again.
Okay, all right.
But
this time in 12 months you'll be going, I said never before, but I'm all over it again now. We'll be back for sure. As we do wrap up, I did want to ask you, for those people listening to the show, I guess just some things to get started with, some thoughts to take away, some ideas, some inspiration, some action plans. If someone was listening to this and they said, that's fantastic, what would be the gospel according to Rel when it comes to storytelling around brand?
I think some of the things we talk about, you've got a brand, so be aware of what it is and take control of it. There's some real reluctance to share stories, especially personal stories and vulnerable ones, because you think showing any form of vulnerability is risky, but my advice is do it. And also a lot of people think, I just don't have any stories. No one would be interested in my story, but they are, because as humans, we're actually hardwired to listen to stories. So we listen to stories. So that's sort of, I guess, the inspiration. Clearly, on a practical thing, buy the book, because the feedback's been amazing, and I think it's the stories in it will not only show you how to do this well, but I think will really inspire you. And there's lots of examples in there like Barbie that you'll just go, wow, that's a cool story. And I think the more stories you hear, it'll spark your own that you go, oh, actually, I've sort of got a similar one. So, yeah, the book's out now. So
well, the book is out now, and I've got a copy in my hot little hand, and I'm going to do my best Molly Meldrum impersonation for those old enough to remember Countdown and Molly Meldrum. Ladies and gents, do yourself a favour. Grab a copy of the book. It is a good read, and I can tell you it's a good read because it is full of stories. It's engaging. It's a book that educates and entertains all at the same time. So I really have found it a wonderful read, and it's called Magnetic Stories, Connect with Customers and Engage Employees with Brand Storytelling. And this is out at bookstores, correct? Or they can grab it at a bookstore from March 1st?
All the usual, online, in store. We are having up until the 25th of March some multiple options for books to try to get it going, and we can probably put that in the link. But literally, if you buy 10 copies, you'll receive an extra copy for free, and you'll also receive a free ticket to my online workshop called Your Stories, Your Brand, which literally is the 10 copies will pay for the workshop. So it's almost like the workshop will pay for itself. So they'll be in the link somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll put all that in the links. That'll be good. Fantastic, Rel. That's really good. And again, congratulations on number 6. It feels like there's another couple to come, I reckon, but no pressure.
10's got a nice round number.
10 does have a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Yeah.
I need another lockdown. I need another, 4-month lockdown in Melbourne.
Let's not wish for that, hey?
No, let's not wish for that.
Yeah. All right, my friend, you're an absolute superstar. Thank you once again, and look forward to seeing you around the traps shortly. And hopefully for those of you in Melbourne like you are, El, just take good care. Let's get through this next little period of lockdown, and we'll see you on the other side of that.
Yeah, thanks, Jess.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jessie Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessiegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist.